You're listening to the Indy 500 podcast, where each week we break down a different album from the Enemy Magazine Top 500 Albums of All Time list. This week I cashed in on a birthday clause and decided that we should discuss Pearl Jam's landmark album, 10. There might be albums that the diehards argue are better, maybe more artistic or experimental, more indicative of the true nature of the band. When it comes to Pearl Jam, few albums define the explosive nature of the grunge era better than this album. When we talk about Pearl Jam, we talk about the Rolling Stones and the Grateful Dead of Gen X all rolled into one. A band that has sold 85 million records worldwide. There's no greater tome or recorded history in circulation than the book written by our guest today. The book Pearl Jam Live, 35 Years of Legendary Music and Revolutionary Shows, details the ascent from late 80s rock band Mother Love Bone, needing to find a new singer to carry onto an act that will sell at the largest stadiums and arenas in the world in a matter of moments. We are thrilled and fortunate today to be able to speak with the author of Pearl Jam Live, Selena Fragassi. Selena is a music journalist who has contributed to the Chicago Sun-Times, Spin Magazine, and Loudwire. She has penned a number of wonderful works that you can find via Cordo Publishing and its Epic Ink label. I would implore you to check out her book about Jagged Little Pill entitled Alanis, an incredible look into an all-time album as well, as a captivating personality that is Alanis. Selena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those who haven't seen it yet, your book is structured a lot like a Pearl Jam set list. 24 songs that track the major themes and eras. What inspired this format? How did you kind of come to that idea and laying out your book like that?
Yeah, I think a few things. First, there's been a lot written about Pearl Jam, a lot of really incredible books, most notably, of course, PJ20 that Cameron Crowe did in coordination with some other writers. So I was trying to think of how can I make this book different, and also what really interests me and what am I trying to say about Pearl Jam? And as I was thinking about this and their anniversary of 35 years, really starting with that single show in October of 1990, the legacy of Pearl Jam, in my opinion, is their live career. It is coming to the stage, performing, making every night unique, and bringing together this community of fans. So I wanted to celebrate that with the concert structure of the book and also bringing in fan recollections of their favorite concert memories.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, it takes it to a whole new level when you hear the music live. I mean, Plenty of radio love, of course, but yeah, being there to feel it and hear it, something else. All right, so Pearl Jam is a band with over 1,100 shows, tons of posters, bootlegs, fan images, fan stories. How do you decide what belongs in the book in the end?
I was trying to think if there was a way to chronologically go through the band's tour history, and that was quickly aborted because they have 1,100 shows and there would just be way too much to talk about. It would be like a 1,000-page book. So what I did was, and of course, I wanted to tie in the history because I think they were dovetailing. I think as the band was progressing and things were going on in their history as well as culturally, it really married to what was happening with the shows. And so the book became a little bit different. And what I did was I tried to pull out some of the really special moments, whether it was with little graphics in the story, whether it was with an example of their set list, whether it was with the fan memory, things of that nature. So trying to decide which shows to put in was incredibly hard, but I tried to put in some from kind of every era in, the US and in Europe and overseas. So I tried to get a mix in there, but yeah, it was a very hard decision in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, you definitely, touched on some of the bigger moments, like the Roskilde event, the 93 Key Arena show that everybody loves, and yeah, MTV Unplugged, all those things. So you definitely got a lot in there. It's pretty comprehensive.
Thank you.
So when you were researching the band, the early shows, what was something that surprised you about that whole, how things came to be? Any particular stories that just I didn't know that, or I didn't think that was how it was?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came when I was researching the Seattle scene and how that really set such a key foundation for Pearl Jam and many other bands who came from that world. And, when I have a whole chapter devoted to Andy Wood, and for good reason, because he was just such a magnanimous character. And I feel like if he hadn't have died, as sad as it was, I don't even know that the Seattle sound would have gotten as big as it did, because I feel like in so many ways it was an homage to the dream that Andy had, and they worked really hard for it, and they were all united. Temple the Dog, you think about all the ways that the community members worked with each other and guested and collaborated. And so I think Andy from Beyond was the magic that brought everyone together. So I didn't really have a grasp on that idea until I was digging into the book. And just too, how Pearl Jam's story has been so mired in tragedy, from losing Andy in the beginning to all the people from the scene that have been lost, to even Eddie Vedder dealing with the lot, not knowing his real biological father, and how they have continually soldiered on and have been kind of like the last surviving band with all members basically intact at this point. So those two things, like I kind of knew on the surface, or I knew of the sort of situations around them, but didn't have that greater understanding until I really dug into the material.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sliding doors to what if moment. How does Eddie Vedder even come into the scene? If Andy Wood passes or doesn't pass, then is he ever discovered, or is he just strumming in a coffee shop?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you write about a little bit how the Seattle scene was a little bit more collaborative and kind of an all for one attitude than maybe like the 80s LA metal scene or rock scene. I'm wondering, how did that spirit like shape the birth of Pearl Jam?
Yeah, I think because, and Seattle was so interesting, which again, I didn't realize because they were so remote in so many ways that a lot of tours did not end up going through Seattle in that 80s, 90s time period. So a lot of it was the punk bands coming through, the van tours. And that was elemental in shaping the Seattle brethren and their sound and their ideals and the DIY nature of them. And I think because it was a town where there wasn't like a ton to do. The weather's miserable. I mean, I love Seattle. I'm not panning it, but
I'm
they were
looking
also
outside right now, and I can verify all that. Yep.
But it sets a mood. Like I love Seattle, but and also just there was like an economic downturn at the time. There's a lot to kind of be angsty about. And so I do think, to your question, the communal aspect, it allowed an outsider certainly to come into the fold. And it could have gone one of many ways, right? Like, he's an outsider. We're not going to accept him. But I think there was this sense of really rooting for Stone and Jeff because people loved them so much that they were willing to give a pass to Eddie because they believed in him. And so I don't know if that would have happened in other scenes, and I think it was just, Temple the Dog really kickstarted a lot of, beyond Nevermind, Temple the Dog kickstarted a lot of this movement. And that was from people coming together and grieving communally over the death of Andy Wood.
Right. I mean, Soundgarden was, a couple albums in, but they weren't, the household name for everybody, nor
Right.
Chris Cornell and Eddie Vedder. And all of a sudden, these guys are singing a duet. And, who are these interesting characters out of Seattle? So that first VHS of the show, you mentioned that October 22nd, 1990 show at the Off-Ramp, where they started. Eddie's pretty shy and withdrawn and, kind of this young pup up there. What struck you most about researching Eddie's transformation as a frontman over time?
It's so interesting. You can tell it if you watch that video. It's all over YouTube. It's very grainy, of course, because it's from 1990 and on a camcorder or something.
Betamax, exactly.
Yeah, but you can still tell what's going on and you can make out the characters. And like you said, Eddie is very shy in the beginning. He has a ball cap on. He's kind of crouched over. He's hiding. He's in a shell. And as the crowd gleans to him and he warms up, that cap is gone and he's not like Tarzan yet, but he's definitely getting into the vibe and he's feeding off this audience. And I think, it just got more progressive with time to where he was that banshee swinging from rafters, people thinking he may die at Pink Pop or Lollapalooza. But he had so much passion for this project. And I think, now he's older and maybe a bit wiser when it comes to physical safety, but he still has that persona about him where he wants to be known and be a presence and take things to the next level. And he still does that at this age and in this day with Pearl Jam.
Yeah, he's very much got that punk energy with the showmanship at heart going on. And it was really funny in the book too, just to kind of read what was going through people's minds as he's climbing the rafters and everything. We see this and think, oh my God, this guy's awesome. I love it. And then, meanwhile, there's a whole crew like, oh God, is Eddie going to die? What in the world's going on here?
Nobody had seen it. And there's a funny anecdote from Dave Grohl because Nirvana and Pearl Jam had a very short part of that triple package tour with Red Hot Chili Peppers. And I think it was New Year's Eve and Dave Grohl, there's a comment of him of being like, who the hell is this guy? And is he going to die tonight? But yeah, that was the fear. And I I can't imagine bands doing that nowadays. That would have freaked me out if I would have seen it.
Oh yeah, I mean even reaching down to high five or crowd surfing or something like that today. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So 1991, the Stone Gossard demos, the Mama Son trilogy, as it's come to be known. What did you learn about how those demos kind of shaped the core of early Pearl Jam sound?
The evolution of that tape is really cool. And so in the beginning, it was just Stone Gossard's instrumental demos of music he was just working on after Mother Love Bone had disbanded and he just needed to keep busy. And of course, that tape made its way to Eddie Vedder through Jack Irons. And the way that everyone worked so fast in the beginning was just shocking. I mean, Eddie took that, he had some ideas rolling through his head when he heard the instrumentals. And I think he went out for a surf and then came back and in like a matter of days had written this trilogy, this, for lack of a better analogy, his own version of The Who's Tommy, his favorite band. And it was creepy, so very creepy. If you really think about, I'm sure most fans know, of course, the story of Alive and what that was about and the weird incestuous mother-son and criminality behind it. But, of course, it was very powerful and evocative. And so it did strike the ears of Stone and Jeff when they got that tape back. And I think, to hear Eddie is so such an emotional vocalist. And so they could hear that in him already. But again, what was so cool is they got that tape, they saw the potential in him. He flew out to Seattle, and in a matter of like 2 weeks, they had so much material and had a show. The fact that they could find that chemistry and it started with that demo tape is just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was just such a perfect match to even happen that fast and to.
No worries.
Okay, yeah, it was such a quick turnaround from demo to let's fly this guy out here to all of a sudden hey, we're a band, we've got a thing to do. So as they release 10 and they're putting it out, as big as it's revered historically and for all the sales, it was kind of a slow burn to become like the all-time record that we think of it now. What are your thoughts as to like what finally led it to break big? What were some of those key moments along the way that people took notice and turned it into this all-time album?
Yeah, it had a hard time finding a spot, especially with like radio at that point, because radio was still finding its place after kind of hair metal and alt rock wasn't really kind of like a thing yet, alternative radio. And I think it was really Nevermind breaking through the gates for that scene in general. Nevermind was such a huge part of the zeitgeist at that point. And I think, where maybe Nirvana was a bit more punky and raw, Pearl Jam came through and had a bit more of a kind of traditional rock sound. And so I think that did end up leaning to the different broadcasters who were hearing it, because radio was pivotal back then, of course, right? But then the music videos that Pearl Jam did just showed, like, you had not Alive, sorry, but it was Even Flow, where Eddie was just that banshee on camera. But what I really think made the difference for Pearl Jam was Lollapalooza, because that came shortly before, like, actually in real time, it was growing with them. Because Pearl Jam, when they were booked for Lollapalooza in 92, they were booked in a very small stage because they didn't have that potential yet. And it was more kind of like a favor because they had the same manager and team as Perry Farrell.
They're the 3 in the afternoon band, that you hear on the way in. And yeah, you're looking for your merch. Here's Pearl Jam.
Yeah. And by the time Lollapalooza is kicking off, and as Lollapalooza is going along throughout that summer, their popularity is growing in real time thanks to radio and MTV. And people were like bum rushing the gates, trying to get there early. It was a stampede. There's some really cool recollections of people in the book about that Lollapalooza summer. And so I think that was really what elementally changed it for them, was being on Lollapalooza.
Yeah, if I had a time machine and could go back and watch any tour, I think just seeing one of those shows with that lineup early on, like, just absolutely bonkers. Yeah, I've started picking up a great book too about Lollapalooza, and just I wish I was old enough to go then. Man, so cool.
Oh, the one by Richard Beanstalk and Tom.
Yes. Yeah.
Such a great oral history.
That's a good one.
And Richard is, I interviewed Richard for my book.
Oh, amazing.
So he gives some really great background and context for, again, why that really was pivotal for Pearl Jam. But yeah, I wish I would have been too. I was too young, but
so cool.
Incredible.
So when it comes to set list, you talked a little bit in the book about how Pearl Jam would even just, pull from this massive catalog and curate a set list like minutes before going on stage. In your research, like how does that spontaneity kind of affect the fan relationship, and like does it make them excited, or is it kind of like, oh god, I hope we hear it's this kind of mood tonight? What's the vibe there?
Well, it evolved. So in the beginning, they didn't have enough material to really do too much with the set list. It could be just 10 in the beginning. And so people did hear a lot of the radio hits because they had about 3 or 4 at that point. But as time went on, they had more material. I think they'd already had developed this fan base who appreciated them live. So they had carte blanche to really explore what they wanted to do in the live space. And I think as time again went on from there, fans expected it, and Pearl Jam wanted to deliver, because I think Pearl Jam was really unique in the fact that their biggest person that they wanted to impress was the fan. It wasn't a record label, it wasn't radio, it wasn't MTV. You can tell because they blacked all that out at one point. And they took Ticketmaster to task because they cared so much about the fans. And to me, fans know that. Fans know how much they care about their experience. And that's why people keep going to see this band live.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they're playing to themselves, you know, the kids that are there, you know, saving up their money to go see the show, and they want to show them a great time and, you know, make sure they can come back at an affordable rate, and, you know, just love that attitude for them. So the bootlegs and
they remember being fans too.
Right,
they were all such fans of bands, and they wanted to pass that on. And so more than a lot of other bands, they just always were very carefully considerate about that.
Yeah, and now the fans are all grown-ups, or at least a lot of them are grown-ups and have the money to pay a little bit more. So, you know, I guess it's okay now. So yeah, the posters and bootlegs, they really do create this mythology. What was like some of the stuff you found out about like the visual and collector culture, you know, associated with Pearl Jam?
I've seen it firsthand at any show, especially, so I live in Chicago. Wrigley Fields is hallowed ground for Pearl Jam. They've played there, I believe, 7 times total. And I see that line snaking through to the point where Wrigley sets up their own dedicated merch tent that even if you don't have a ticket, you can come to. And people want to get their hands on the limited edition designed posters. They want to get the limited edition t-shirts. And I feel like Pearl Jam was ahead of the game in that. I feel like now we have a lot of music artists who partner with visual artists to get these one night only visual poster series going. But I feel like Pearl Jam was really a vanguard in that respect. And I think it just adds to the idea of being collectors and building this vault that you can have, and you want to remember the shows you were at. And again, Pearl Jam remembers that from being fans, and Eddie used to bootleg the Who shows. So they brought their own sense of fandom into all of their decisions they made for their fans too. And it just, again, created this community that just has supported them forever.
Yeah, I mean, it blew my mind when I was 15 years old walking into a Borders bookstore and going through the CD rack, and all of a sudden there's like 10 different Pearl Jam bootlegs. Like, oh wait, what? They're doing this now? Okay. And all of a sudden it's like I'm there part of the tour too. You know, I can afford a $15 CD, but maybe not a $50 ticket. So it was a great fan service as well there.
It's genius. And I wish bands would do it now, because I can't tell you how many times, and we all have access with our smartphones.
Right.
We can record video, but it's shitty. And so you get home and you're like, I want to be able to play a professional version of it and remember how I felt in that moment.
Right, exactly. I can show it to somebody, but you know, how good is it without the experience of being there to hear it? You know, oh, that's cool. Good for you. Yeah. All right. I'll have to go next time. No, you talk about the merch thing though. It's in Seattle, the last couple shows they did here, they had a whole stand outside the stadium for like a week. And it was just, you know, every day you drive by and every day there'd be message board posts, you know, hey, do they have this today? What's new today? What's signed today? What's out of print? And just like the culture is insane around it. And I can't wait to get down to the next one and just, see if I can find anything cool. It's a fun scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when it comes to like their concerts, what is it, you know, that maybe differentiates them? Obviously the music, but from a band like, you know, the Rolling Stones or Taylor Swift or any of these major artists, what culturally, you know, drives it to make Pearl Jam such an event?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Taylor Swift because I feel like what she's doing now with obviously a very different demographic is very similar to the Pearl Jam model, where she's releasing her Taylor versions of albums and she is doing that as a service to her fans. And she has this culture with the friendship bracelets and all the different generations coming in and creating a community. So I think she took Ticketmaster to task. I think she's learned from Pearl Jam for sure. But what makes a Pearl Jam show so special, I think, beyond the music is just the uniqueness of it. I think people feel like they're going to have FOMO if they don't go and miss out on a show. I certainly, when they come to Chicago, I had tend to review night one and then I go night two as a fan because I know it's going to be totally different. So it's different in that regard. I think that they've also, because they've been around for 35 years, they can play around more. They also don't have a ton of visual production. They've been very sparse in that regard over their touring legacy. And I feel like that's very intentional because then they can play with the set list. If you're a Taylor Swift, everything is very visual and you have to do the same song order every night because it cues up to what's happening with the production. So on the latest, the Dark Matter tour, they actually worked with Rob Sheridan of Nine Inch Nails fame. And so it was cool to see them having some really pretty visuals in the background too. So I don't know, I like both.
Yeah, it looked like they kind of brought a little different game this time around, but still flexible enough to, they could put on the show they wanted to put on in the moment, not, bound by, okay, here's where the bell comes down and Angus has to jump on the bell to play the solo and all the little planned big events. So no, that's pretty cool. I was kind of thinking about that a little bit with Taylor, like other than Pearl Jam, I haven't seen that space by the arenas that insane, except for when Taylor was in town and they had the pop-up shops everywhere and it was just hundreds of thousands of people. It felt like, mob in the streets trying to buy tickets, trying to buy merch, then trying to resell the merch and just this whole big crazy scene.
I know. It's a whole ecosystem.
Oh, yeah. So you touched on it briefly, the Ticketmaster battle. It's kind of one of their big, headlines from the 90s and as they were, rising up the charts. What did you find most surprising about like the behind the scenes reality of that fight?
They had supporters in the beginning. There were quite a few bands. REM was one. There was another country artist. I can't remember. I don't want to say a name if it's wrong, but there were people on their side with it. And then when it came time for them to go to Capitol Hill, it was just Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
So putting their money where their mouth is. I mean, going to a Senate hearing, that took a lot of bravery. And these were young guys, they were in their 20s at the time, to really do that and have the onus to take that battle on with such a giant company. But, I think while they were doing that, the way they stuck to their guns and their convictions and tried to do their own tour, what band would do that? Like that is someone else's full-time job. And it's funny because Eddie talks about it in retrospect and it's like, we had to figure out the porta potty situation. Right. He's like, we didn't know what we were doing, but they were so strong in their belief of that they really used all their muscle to try to make it happen. And I think it's interesting because it really got sparked off by the fact that when a few things, but when they were having charity shows or the show to get people to vote in Seattle, and it was free and Ticketmaster was charging a service fee on it. Right. And they were so incensed by that. And so I think it's just a great example of, a band standing behind their platform and trying to take down things that are not right. And they've done that for so many causes, not just ticketing.
Yeah, no, I mean, if there's ever a band with, the moral compass and the convictions to do it, I mean, yeah, obviously we know they eventually kind of had to give up and play ball, but I mean, they gave it their best. I mean, and kind of made people stand up and, think about it a little bit. I don't know. I wish I had seen, Jeff Ament, on C-SPAN speaking to, Congress and everything like that. Would be kind of a trip, but yeah, a crazy battle. So you talk about the causes a little bit, not just Ticketmaster. They're very philanthropic too. They have the Vitalogy Foundation with more than 50 million raised. How did researching that dimension of the band change your outlook and understanding of Pearl Jam?
It added to my thesis for this book, which is really that Pearl Jam is a band for the people. They have taken up a lot of causes before it was, cool to do so. I mean, they were championing abortion rights and women's rights and the homeless and the environment. And they've been the Kosovo, where they donated the song to the relief effort CD. They've been very attuned and aware of what's happening as global citizens, and then taking that back to their music. And maybe their music isn't always political, but their causes always are. And they talk about it on stage and live and in the ways that they're donating their money. They're very transparent with where the Vitalogy Foundation money goes to. And if you buy a ticket to a Pearl Jam show, $1 or more of that is going to the Vitalogy Foundation. And so I think, my respect for them grew just knowing how early on they were sort of avengers for people. And, they could have, today a lot of artists would worry about cancel culture. You go on TV and you're writing pro-choice on your arm, and you could have been yanked from SNL forever for something like that. I mean, Sinead O'Connor ripping up a photo of the Pope sure did. But I don't think they cared. No. And I truly respect that about them.
Yeah, no, that's a real good point. I mean, some of the causes out there would definitely raise some eyebrows and, get some networks turning their heads and maybe pulling the music. But I mean, I think the fans respected them more and more for it and just standing by it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, they're a band of the people. How does that manifest in 2025 as opposed to in the 90s when they did, have all these causes for like Ticketmaster where it really affected people's wallets? How are they doing that now?
I think they have more access to broadcast their message, such as on social media, on SiriusXM and other platforms in their shows. I think they now are such giants in the industry that they don't have to censor themselves or have any fear. I don't think they ever would have anyway, but even, they carry on the torch through the generations. And so in the 90s, they were speaking about abortion rights, and when Roe v. Wade was overturned, they were right there again talking about it. And so they don't let these issues go. The Jeremy video is another great example. They hated that video in the beginning because of the graphicness of it. And then when it got time to talking about school shootings and the gun control issues we have in the country now, again, they brought up that cause again, and they released the unedited version of the video that showed everything, because they didn't like how it was edited, I should say. Right. And they showed the uncensored video at the end. So I think they're so constantly aware of what's happening, and the minute they feel like there's something wrong, they're going to bring it up. You even see it at shows where, like, Eddie will stop shows. He did that one time where he saw a woman being harassed by someone in the audience. They're constantly aware. They're good humans at the end of the day.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And, I think being a band that's so connected with the people, they feel, the tragedies a little bit more. And, one of those incidents that almost broke up the band was that Roskilde Festival, where people were trampled in the crowd and everything. How did you approach telling that story, while still trying to convey its long-term impact? I mean, it definitely left a mark.
That was probably one of the hardest parts for me to write in the book, because I feel like I'm such an empathetic person, and I was putting myself into the mind frame of Pearl Jam, who in the beginning were being blamed for this. And I can't imagine what that did to their psyche of knowing how much, again, they did care for people. Mm. And if they had known what was happening, they would have stopped that show like they've done so many times. And so I felt that so depressed writing that chapter, because this was real, that people lost their lives at a concert where they went to enjoy it. And I had to report on that too, because it is part of what happened, but it makes me sad that they had such a stain on their legacy at that point, because people thought they really were guilty of 8 people dying. And just knowing thereafter how the band really did weigh breaking up at that point. I mean, it's remarkable to me that they did survive, and what it maybe did to usher in who they have been as a band post-millennium.
Yeah. No, I didn't realize the impact it had until I read about that. And, I kind of just assumed like, oh, they're on a little break and, some new tunes will be out eventually. But no, it really left a mark, and really weighed on all of us. Just kind of, I would echo your sentiments that, I was a little bummed out reading that chapter.
It was very sad, and to know that they didn't even feel comfortable playing festivals for a very long time after that, understandably so.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that does to someone who is a creator and wants to create happy joyful places for people, and knowing that there's such a tragedy. Even now they reflect on it because every kind of anniversary for it, milestone anniversary, they write a new letter about their reflections and knowing that they've met the families of the people who died too,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they're taking a lot on, with people blaming them for it and putting it on their plate. I mean, obviously they wouldn't have chosen for that to happen anyway. And they're such good guys at heart. It's admirable the way that they've, really risen to the occasion though. But with a band
Yes.
like that, that might be a moment that breaks up a lot of other bands. Is there something like in the DNA of the band, in that brotherhood that has just made it so they can push through those moments and really persevere?
I think it's because Pearl Jam was founded on a foundation of tragedy. I think it's because they dealt with losing Eddie, with the stuff with his father, I think with losing Kurt. I mean, there's just been constant tragedy in the story of Pearl Jam. And I think that they also kind of knew that going forward was a gift as much to the fans as it was for themselves. And I think that they thought maybe they kind of owed it to people in a weird way.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I mean, yeah, it's something that's kind of continued too. They talk about, when Chris Cornell passed away, that was a whole, huge moment for a lot of the guys in the band that, grew up with him and, had all these moments together. And I guess it's just a microcosm of life, that sometimes those things can unite people a little bit.
It is. And I feel like, with so many of those bands having either gone or just they're not active right now because they don't have members, or even with Alice in Chains still carrying on, there's still people who have been lost. And I feel like they in some way maybe feel like that's their kind of mantle to take in a way. I think Eddie certainly feels it. And he did when Kurt died, and even up through today. So
yeah, we're the last of the breed. We got to keep going while we can and, keep honoring all our friends and, peers that we came up with. So I think fans kind of look at Pearl Jam in eras of drummers. They've definitely had a little, I wouldn't say revolving door, but they've had some names, come through.
Yeah.
Did you notice patterns like in how the band's live energy would change with the drummers as you listen back, or even as you've gone to shows over the years?
Yeah. I mean, they have referred to it as their Spinal Tap situation in PJ20. So they take note of it. I've only seen them with one drummer, of course, being Matt, just because of my age. I didn't go to those early shows. But it's interesting because I don't know about the live setting as much, but I feel like with the albums, certainly. So you have, someone like Jack Irons, who really kind of brought through this experimentalism that they kind of did. Matt Cameron too. Matt Cameron, is a jazz guy. And so I think that the music definitely changed with the different drummers, and which makes it very curious for me to see who they're going to put in that seat now that Matt is gone, and how that might change the band again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to be getting, I guess what we would call new Soundgarden music, but yeah, it's a little bit of a scary mystery. What's on the other side of, the next Pearl Jam release without Matt, but I'm sure it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even think who they would get at this point. I can't even think of a drummer who could, because that, like, if all the jobs in Pearl Jam are very important and essential and difficult, for lack of a better term, because especially as you get older. But the drumming in that band and how physical it is, I mean, that's a big gig.
Yeah, I mean, somebody that can not only write when it comes to albums, but then put up and learn 100-song set list, so they can pull it all out of their hat. Matt had 25 years to work on doing that and incorporating all the catalog and then some. I mean, so whoever walks in, they got the work cut out for them.
I'm curious.
So were there any lost or forgotten shows that you found along the way that kind of took on new meaning, like once you dug through and looked at the archives and heard the stories?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think, my understanding of PJ20 changed a bit too, because I always talk about that show as being the one where I kind of got brought back into the Pearl Jam world, because they had fallen off my radar a little bit between the late 90s until that in 2011. So researching that show a bit more and knowing, the way they wanted to pay homage to Mother Love Bone and Temple the Dog and bringing Chris Cornell out for it. I think my understanding of that show grew a bit more. I think there were shows that I didn't know about, like the Apache Nation show in Arizona, where this land was going to be taken away from a tribal nation, and they went to bat for them. I didn't even know about that show and
That's
their
amazing.
history. Yeah, and it's interesting too because they had so much time where they spent overseas and not in America, which for an American band is sort of unique. I think some of that was by design, of course, in the Ticketmaster battle era, but they really cultivated their international fan base as well. So they're and they had from Lollapalooza '92 to coming back in 2007, and just seeing the differences of how they were different, grew in that era, in that time, and came back. And we're taking on the live stream at that point because they censored them.
Yep.
There were so many shows, and I painstakingly typed up all 1,100. One, because I had to, because I wanted it to be part of the book.
Yeah.
But two, it made me understand the magnitude of their live career. And then I could think about all the different shows that they've done, all the different cities they visited, the venues that were repeated, the things that were intentional, like playing all these ballparks like Fenway and Wrigley. And yeah, there's so much intention behind every single place and city they went to.
Yeah, and we had recently done a deep dive on Prince's like Purple Rain era and what the band was like during that time, and looking at the chronology, then it's very similar in that like if they're not playing a show in those early days, they are writing, they're recording, they are going, go and go, and those first couple of years are just almost nonstop, and wherever they can find it, they're going to play, and really admirable, and I think it just helped the myth grow even more.
Exactly.
So you talked about Roskilde a little bit. Obviously, a hard chapter to write, hard to talk about too much. Is there anything in terms of like lack of information that was maybe hard to write, or kind of conflicting reports as you went along?
One was the departure of Dave Abruzzes. We don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it because he wasn't on board with the Ticketmaster and the media blackout. There's very conflicting kind of ideals about that. I think the challenge was that Pearl Jam did a ton of interviews early on in their career, and there was a ton to mine through for that period of their lifespan. But they, of course, had a media blackout for a while, so it was hard to infer what kind of was going on or their thoughts at that time. And then as time has gone on, they haven't done a ton of. They've been very selective, although the ones they've done now are longer, so that's great. But yeah, because I really wanted to make sure I didn't have access to the band for this book, of course, but I wanted to make sure to get as much in their words as I possibly could to be very authentic to how they thought and felt. And so interviews were key for me. And so, but there were time periods where there wasn't a lot available.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Kind of hard to write about what they don't talk about. I mean, it's just kind of conjecture at that point.
Yeah.
So are there any stories, pictures that you feel left out that like, okay, if we go back and do a re-release of this in 4 or 5 years, I want to make sure that's in there. Anything that's kind of on the cutting room floor?
Well, Matt Cameron didn't make it because he announced that after the book went to the publisher. So I think there would be something to say about that. I think, if anything, if there was to be another edition of this book, I would love to pull out more specific show dates and talk about what happened at those shows. I would actually love to do a second book where it was just that, now that I've established kind of the history and the format and the themes behind it. And I would love to have more fan memory submissions, because in the book there's about 18, I think. But there's so many people out there who they've written to me on social media as well. People's relationship with this band is very unique and special. And there were so many moments that either made me laugh, were incredibly emotional for me, or I was like, I felt that at my show too. So I think in combination, that would be a book about like the chronology of their touring life and the big shows and the fan submissions.
Yeah. I mean, even if you did it like on social media and release some more of those like fan moments, like I loved reading those. And yeah, there were some that were like hysterical, guys all of a sudden next to one of the band members and doesn't even realize it. Or, there's a story about the woman that had cancer, and made it to the show. And it's just like, yeah, that's what it's all about, that community, that crowd, and why they're such an inspiring, band for some people.
Absolutely.
So of those fan memories, is there one that's maybe stayed with you the most?
There's two. Well, they all have, but there's two that really have stayed with me and I think about a lot. One is when you just mentioned Michelle, who was battling cancer. I haven't heard from her since this book was published, but a friend of mine who does know her says that she is still around, thank goodness. But she was had a very brave fight ahead of her, and in between rounds of chemo, she went to as many Dark Matter tour shows as she possibly could. And for her, it was very healing, and the way she writes about what it did for her health and mental health was beautiful, and just goes to show how this band matters so much to people in very personal ways. And I think the other one was I was chatting with the guy who wrote the show about the memory about backpacking and hitchhiking through Australia. And for a few reasons, he didn't want to talk about it that much in his recollection, but he was at Roskilde. And so I actually found his name because as I was researching Roskilde, his name came up in Rolling Stone in their coverage of it. And I was like, I want to see if this guy is maybe on social media. And he's actually a filmmaker.
Oh, wow.
Yannick is, he's a filmmaker. And so I found him on social media and I reached out to him and I said, I'm doing this book and I if you're open to it and feel okay writing about it, I would love a recollection of being at Roskilde. I think it would be really impactful for the book. And he said, my memories of that show aren't that great anymore. He's like, whether I blacked it out or he's like, I just don't remember that much from that day. But he said, I do have another Pearl Jam story and I wanted to share it. And I think, his story is really beautiful too, because it talks about like this idea of this woman who broke up with him and they were supposed to go to a show together and he did it anyway. And again, how music again is so personal and helps you through hard times, no matter if it's death or if it's illness or if it's a breakup.
Totally. I mean, it's live music is just, medicine for the soul at the end of the day. And yeah, Pearl Jam, any other band, get to a show and it's going to make you feel a little bit better for a couple of hours.
Yeah, for sure.
So after spending so long in the history, what do you think the next decade ahead looks like for Pearl Jam?
Oh, it's such a great question. I don't know, because especially now that Matt Cameron threw this left curveball, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're not going to keep going. I think that's going to be a very big decision to make. I think this band loves what they do so much that they're going to keep touring unless something would prevent them from doing so, because they are getting older, of course. I think they're going to keep releasing music. I think they're probably going to maybe I would hope, do some more solo stuff, or, whether it's Eddie doing his ukulele kind of solo driven works with the Earthlings, or, I know Brad has been kind of on the wayside ever since the passing there, but I don't know, it'd be cool to see some more of that picked up as well. And, of course, Matt Cameron, I hope something happens with Soundgarden.
Right. I mean, pipe dream for me is kind of like, how about we do a Pearl Jam Soundgarden tour and Matt Cameron just pulls 5-hour duty and, is sponsored by Red Bull for the whole thing. And yeah, we just get the best of both worlds.
We're putting it out into the ether. Yeah,
exactly. So I guess, we got through the meat of the set list here. We got to throw a few encore questions out there.
Okay.
What is your live experience with Pearl Jam? Do you have like a first show that really sticks out, a favorite that like, oh my God, I'll never have this cool of a show again? What's your history with them?
Okay, so my first show, I believe it's my first show because I cannot remember going to another Pearl Jam show before it. I think, again, because my age, I was a bit too young in the 90s, but I got an assignment to cover PJ20. So at that point I was already a music journalist. And that was, again, it brought me right back into the fold of Pearl Jam because I had kind of stopped listening after 10 versus Vitalogy. I've said this before, but I think my ear just wasn't mature enough to really understand what they were doing with the experimenting on the albums after that. So they fell off my radar a bit. But when I went to the show, it brought me right back into all the reasons why I loved Pearl Jam. And just seeing all these people from all over the world show up with their flags. We were all in line to see the stuff at the museum or to get merch. And the rumor about Chris Cornell coming out, and then I cried that weekend. I literally cried.
I mean, oh God, that's incredible. Yeah.
I still get chills thinking about it. It was just such a memorable weekend for me. So that I think would have been my first, and memorable for sure. But another memorable occasion was the very epic weather delay show at Wrigley Field in 2013, where I thought I might die in that concourse, but I'm like, I'm sticking it out because I'm not missing Pearl Jam play this show.
Was it just a good old fashioned baseball rain delay and, how long can we stay here kind of thing? Yeah.
Yeah, so they played 7 songs. I think it was 7, and then there was weather in the area, lightning. So of course they couldn't go forward.
Yeah.
So they got on the microphones and they said, we have to take a break for the weather delay, but we are going to be back. We will play till whatever time of the night. So stay with us. So everyone had to huddle into the concourse because it's not a domed field or anything. And Wrigley Field's an old ballpark, so it's not made to put that many people in one spot.
Yeah.
And I'm claustrophobic. I'm like, this may be my last night alive. I'm not sure, but it's worth it. I'll go out. And so the band did come back on, and at the wee hours in the morning, they played till like 2 a.m. It was incredible.
That's amazing. I mean, I've been there for a game, and it's not exactly the spot I'd like to think of, 30, 40,000 people kind of like in the concourse. No, it's a bit awkward there. So you talked maybe, a second ago about like maybe some solo projects or some offshoots. Do you have like a favorite Pearl Jam offshoot or kind of something relating to them, like Brad, Mad Season, Eddie's solo stuff?
It's going to sound cliche because it's probably one of the most famous, but Mad Season. But I love Lane Staley's voice so very much. So anything, I love Alice in Chains too. So anything Lane did, I'm all about.
That Live at the Moore album and video is one of my favorite like music artifacts to even exist. Just seeing them jam out and Lane having fun out there and kind of this why they were brought together. These are all guys trying to get and stay sober and writing music about it and everything. And here they are for one moment, really doing it.
I love Matt. Yeah, I love Mad Season. I also really love Eddie's Earthlings band. I'm a huge fan of Glenn Hansard. I love Glenn Hansard, who was with the Irish band The Frames, and of course found mainstream fame with the movie Once that he appeared in, and connected with Eddie. And so anything Glenn Hansard does, in fact, a friend of mine who was at PJ20, because Glenn Hansard did some sets during that weekend. She has a photo that she framed for me as a gift of Eddie and Glenn hugging, and it's just like one of my favorite mementos.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that's a nice little super group for you then, as a fan of both.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you have a favorite song coming into researching this project? And maybe was that different on the other side coming out of the project? Or does it stay the same all the way through?
I mean, I have favorite songs. I don't know if I could pick one out. I think, though, the one song that always really moves me, and it has been a song that they have repeatedly played at a lot of the shows I've been at, they normally open with it, of course, is Release. Mm-hmm. Release has such an emotional gravitas to it, and just the like humming that Eddie does, it's almost trance-like. That song will forever and a day stay with me. I love that song so much.
Vastly underrated, when it comes to talking about 10 and everything. I mean, the singles, obviously, the radio love, but no, that's such an amazing song. Can't argue with that choice. So I guess one of the last questions here for you, if you could ask any of the members like a follow-up question or two about something you covered in there, what would you want to know?
Oh, God, that's such a great, great question. I feel like I'd have questions for all of them. But I would love to know from Eddie Vedder the writers and the books that he loves, because he has such a great narrative storytelling aspect. And I know all about the bands he loves. Yeah. And I would love to know the writer side of him. And if he has written more things, is there going to be a book from Eddie Vedder at some point in the future? Because he's such a great storyteller. I would love to, as a writer myself, I'd love to pick that part of his brain a bit.
No, that'd be amazing. I mean, he's such a great storyteller. And even, when he's probably dictating some of those social media messages, I mean, he has a way with even words. Live. Yeah. Yeah.
When you see him live, he tells these amazing stories. I remember here in Chicago a couple of years ago, he did 2 nights at United Center when they just did the band's like hometown shows. Mm-hmm. So they did a couple nights here. And of course, Eddie, being from the Chicago area or having grown up here part of his life, he's always held it very close to his heart. And he had this whole story of how he went back to see the house where his grandmother lived. And there was a new family living there at this point. And he had this whole slideshow in the background to show everything. And he brought the family to the show and they were in the front row. And it was such a beautiful moment that was, again, it's like that. He tells these stories, but he brings these layers to them. And I just love that about him.
Yeah, I don't imagine Axl Rose doing that anytime soon at a Guns N' Roses show. But I mean, Eddie's a one of one in that sense. So yeah. Selena, thank you so much for your time today. Absolutely amazing book. amazing conversation about an amazing band, and we love it. Anything to plug otherwise? Any other books we can check out, or where can we read you?
Yeah, so there's a few more books coming out soon. I don't know if I can mention anything yet, but I'm all over social media. My handle's at Selena Fragassi. To my knowledge, I'm the only one in the world with my name, so if you find me there, it's me. But I also write for the Chicago Sun-Times and for Spin regularly, so if people want to read more of my work, they can find it there.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then as we go, any takeaways you want the audience to have about the book that maybe we didn't touch on?
So the thing about Pearl Jam is, if you're a fan of Pearl Jam, you know a lot about them, right? So me telling this history maybe doesn't change the world for you, but I hope people take it away that this book was written to really bring a lot of different things together, not just their history, but again, like their live, this message for the people, how the fans tie into it. And I come from it as a fan myself, and so I hope people love the book and learn something new or take away a new emotion from it.
Oh yeah, I mean, believe me, I thought I knew everything, and then page after page, it's a new insight and new moment, and yeah, just new connection to a fan experience. So again, a wonderful work, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right.